You'll handle the monthly payments, okay? You make a high income, so it's only natural, right? My mother casually tossed a bomb that would destroy my life, as if she were making small talk. What? I set down the fork I was holding and stared at my mother frozen in place. What did she just say? I desperately tried to process the situation, forcing my brain to spin, but the scene in front of me was so unreal that my thoughts simply could not keep up. At the center of the dining table sat a golden roast duck, still glistening with sauce. Surrounding it were my father, Richard Bennett, cheerfully sipping whiskey, my brother, Julian Bennett, gazing smugly at his new luxury watch with a self-satisfied smile, and my mother, Eleanor Bennett, wearing a perfectly matter-of-fact expression as she delivered her devilish proposal. I work as a senior software engineer at a major tech firm, and I had just returned to my parents' home tonight after being summoned with the words, "There's something important we need to tell you." What they presented was a glossy brochure spread out on the table, along with a thick stack of contract documents. Whispering Pines Estate, an exclusive retreat for the elite nestled in the Colorado Rockies. The cover of the brochure showed a pine forest dusted with snow and a sprawling rustic mansion with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a frozen lake. A stone fireplace, a private hiking trail, and even a helipad. It was truly a dream mountain escape. Because of my profession, I can instantly assess real estate value. This location, this level of quality, no matter how you calculate it, this property would easily cost no less than $1.2 million. Mom, wait a second. I don't understand what you're saying. I asked, my voice trembling. Did you buy this vacation home? Yes, we signed the contract. My mother's voice bounced with excitement. It's for Julian. You know how he doesn't fit in with the fast-paced corporate world and keeps getting burnt out, right? So, I thought he needed a place where he could recharge and focus on his music composition by a quiet mountainside. I looked at my 30-year-old brother sitting next to me, Julian. He has no steady job and calls it finding his artistic voice while using our parents' money to travel to music festivals and buy expensive synthesizers he quickly abandons. A textbook parasite. And by music composition, he probably meant nothing more than making lo-fi beats to post on SoundCloud. Artistic work. Julian, what about your job? What happened to the studio assistant position you just started last month? I quit. Julian answered without a hint of guilt. The producer was a hack, and staring at a screen all day gives me migraines. Besides, I need a more inspirational environment. I feel like my musical genius will finally blossom at this mountain retreat. So, you bought this, Dad, Mom? What about the down payment? Did the loan even get approved? My father slowly set down his whiskey glass and began to speak in a heavy voice. That's where you come in, Clara. Your mother and I will be retiring soon, and passing the screening for a loan this large would be difficult for us, but the banker gave us a wonderful proposal. My father slid the documents that had been tucked beneath the brochure across the table toward me. They were a joint guarantor consent form for a mountain property mortgage and an authorization for automatic monthly withdrawals. The names on the property will be mine, your mother's, and Julian's, but the proof of actual repayment ability and the monthly payments themselves will be your responsibility. What? I shot to my feet without thinking. Don't be ridiculous. Why do I have to pay for Julian's mountain getaway? I'm not even going to live there. That was when my mother said it, just like that. You earn a good living, don't you? We're family, so of course it's natural. The anger went beyond rage, and I felt dizzy. How much studying do you think I did to become a software engineer? And how many sleepless nights I worked to build my career? That salary is compensation for my labor. It's not there to fund Julian's playground. Clara, how dare you talk like that? My father slammed his hand on the table and shouted, "What do you mean a playground? This is an investment in your brother's future. You're the older sister, aren't you? Your brother is struggling, and yet you live elegantly in a city penthouse sitting on money, and you won't even help him. Struggling? Julian isn't struggling at all. He just wants a more luxurious life." That's awful. Julian let out a fake sob and covered his face. You've always been like this. Whenever I try to create, you immediately get in the way. You look down on me just because I'm sensitive, don't you? That's right, Clara. You're the older sister, so you have a duty to protect your younger brother. My mother pressed on relentlessly. And, besides, you have plenty of savings, don't you? I heard you got a promotion recently. It's only $3,000 a month. That's nothing for you, is it? $3,000 a month? For 30 years? Do they have any idea how much that adds up to in total? And they expect me to give that to them? I refuse. I said it coldly. I will never pay, not a single cent. I won't sign that contract, and I'm not giving you my bank account number. Clara, that's enough. When I went to college, you said you didn't have the money and refused to pay a single cent of my tuition. I graduated by nearly killing myself with scholarships and part-time jobs. And during that same time, you bought Julian a brand new sports car. Years of resentment came pouring out. I am not your ATM, Julian. If you want a mountain estate that badly, then get a job and pay for it yourself. I grabbed my bag and started walking toward the front door. Wait, we're not finished talking yet. My mother chased after me, screaming shrilly. You ungrateful child, you can't even listen to your parents' request? Of course I can't listen to something this unreasonable. I shouted back while slipping on my shoes. If you use my name without permission, I won't let it slide. Don't ever call me over for something like this again. If you walk out that door, don't think of us as your family anymore. With my father's curses ringing in my ears, I slammed the door of my parents' house shut. The moment I got into my car and stepped on the accelerator, tears spilled over. Tears of frustration and of humiliation. Had my family really rotted this far? As I drove down the highway at night, I made a vow to myself. I will never return to that house again. I will protect my own life. This is the end. I will cut ties completely once and for all. But at that time, I was still naive. I underestimated their twisted obsession with so-called family bonds and their greed for money. They were not the kind of people who would give up just because I said no. 3 weeks later, when I returned home from work, a thick envelope was sitting in the mailbox of my apartment. The sender was the local district court. The moment I held the envelope marked certified mail and special delivery, a bad feeling made my fingertips tremble. When I opened it, what came out was a lawsuit. Plaintiff, Richard Bennett and Eleanor Bennett. Defendant, Clara Bennett. Claim, the defendant shall pay the plaintiffs the sum of $600,000 as compensation for emotional distress and damages resulting from breach of contract. As I continued reading the complaint, it was filled with an array of unbelievable lies. The defendant had verbally agreed to financially support her parents and brother for the foreseeable future in exchange for allowing her parents to use their retirement funds to purchase a home for the brother. However, the defendant unilaterally broke this agreement, causing the plaintiffs severe emotional distress and significant financial losses. Therefore, as compensation, the plaintiffs demand the sum of $600,000. I have never once made any such verbal agreement. Out of spite for my refusal to pay, they were trying to squeeze money out of me through a legal battle. Are they out of their minds? I muttered to myself in the empty room. Before anger could take hold, a bottomless fear surged up inside me. My own parents had sued me, their daughter, and only for the sake of forcing me to pay for my brother's mountain retreat. Bracing my knees that felt like they might give out at any moment, I grabbed the smartphone resting on the kitchen counter. I had no choice but to fight. Against a monster called family, I was about to enter a lawsuit that would put my very life on the line. The complaint in my hands felt as heavy as lead. My annual income as a software engineer is not bad, but there is no way I could casually come up with a sum like $600,000. And to think it was being demanded based on a completely fabricated verbal agreement. With trembling fingers, I tapped my smartphone screen and first sent a message to my boss requesting time off for the next day. I had to find a lawyer. Not just any lawyer, but a highly capable one who was strong in ugly family disputes and who could prove my innocence. I did not sleep a single minute that night. Every time I closed my eyes, my parents' twisted smiles at the dinner table and my mother's words, "You make a high income, so of course it's natural," replayed over and over, making nausea rise up inside me. The next morning, I visited a law firm. It had a strong reputation online and advertised itself as being experienced in family disputes. Nice to meet you, Clara. I'm David Chin. I've already heard the outline of your situation. I told Attorney Chin everything that had happened up to that point. I see. This is a textbook case of financial abuse. And as for this so-called verbal agreement mentioned in the complaint, proving its existence legally would be extremely difficult for the plaintiffs. Then we can win, right? When I leaned forward, he slowly shook his head with caution. Just because there is no evidence does not automatically mean we will win. In family-related cases, especially civil claims for damages, the judge's personal impressions carry significant weight. If we end up before a judge who places strong moral value on family helping one another, things could become complicated. That can't be. However, we do have a way to fight. First, we must demonstrate that no such contract ever existed, and at the same time build an objective case showing just how unreasonable and unjust their demands are. David Chen's calm and methodical analysis eased my heart, if only slightly. I formally retained him and began preparing for the battle in court. But reality unfolded exactly as David had feared. Several weeks later, the day of the first hearing arrived. In the plaintiff's seats sat my parents and Julian. The moment they saw me, they openly cast looks of contempt in my direction. My mother dabbed at her eyes theatrically with a handkerchief. My father glared at me with open hostility. And Julian, dressed in a black designer sweater, was playing the role of a tortured artist. How shameless. My stomach twisted painfully with anger. Court is now in session. As the clerk's voice rang out, the judge entered from the door at the back of the courtroom. The instant I saw him, I heard David, seated beside me, click his tongue quietly. This is bad. What's wrong? It's Judge Morrison. He's extremely conservative and famous for valuing family bonds above all else. For the plaintiffs, he's the best possible judge. For us, he's the worst. Judge Morrison took his seat on the bench, glanced down at the documents before him, and peered at us over his glasses. Plaintiffs Richard and Eleanor Bennett. Defendant Clara Bennett. Parent and child, is it? Truly regrettable. From the very beginning, he made no attempt to hide his bias. Counsel for the plaintiffs, your opening statement. The lawyer hired by my parents stood up and began speaking with exaggerated gestures. Your Honor, my clients, the Bennett couple, have loved and nurtured their daughter, the defendant, Clara, with devotion and care. The fact that the defendant was able to succeed as a software engineer is due entirely to the selfless support of her parents. Every word of it was a lie. The defendant promised to repay that debt of gratitude by supporting her brother Julian's home purchase. This was a sacred promise between family members, and yet at the very last moment, the defendant broke it, driving her elderly parents and her emotionally fragile brother to the brink of despair. In the plaintiff's seats, my mother and Julian began to cry out loud. Judge Morrison watched them with sympathetic eyes and then turned his gaze toward me. His eyes were cold, as if he were looking at a criminal. Defendant, Clara Bennett, how do you respond to the statement you just heard? David Chin stood up and calmly rebutted the claim. Your Honor, every assertion made by the plaintiffs is completely unfounded. The defendant has never made such a promise. And furthermore, the so-called support the plaintiffs are demanding is so excessive that it would ruin the defendant's own life. Excessive? Judge Morrison scoffed. According to the documents, the defendant's annual income far exceeds the average for her age group. She is single and has no dependents. On the other hand, her brother, Julian, has been unable to secure steady employment and is struggling financially. The judge leaned forward from the bench and addressed me directly. Clara, before legal arguments, I want to ask you this as a human being. Do you have no sense of compassion? Excuse me? Blood is thicker than water, as the saying goes. When someone with financial means helps a struggling family member, that is a moral obligation that comes even before any legal duty. And yet you refuse to pay simply because there is no written contract. Do you not feel ashamed? A murmur rippled through the courtroom. I could not believe my ears. The judge was lecturing me unilaterally based not on law, but on morality. But, Your Honor, I found myself shouting despite everything. I earn my living through my own hard work. My brother is struggling because he refuses to work. Why must my effort be exploited to pay for his laziness? Order. The sound of the gavel echoed through the courtroom. Defendant, you are not granted permission to speak. Is it not precisely this selfish attitude that caused this lawsuit in the first place? Judge Morrison's face was flushed red. By the next session, I strongly recommend that you consider a settlement. Discuss this within your family and resolve it amicably. Otherwise, the judgment may be a harsh one. It was, in effect, a threat. Court is adjourned. We were practically driven out of the courtroom. Once in the hallway, my parents and Julian, who had been waiting, approached us. You heard him, Clara? My mother smiled smugly. The judge said it himself, didn't he? Stop being stubborn and just pay up already. If you do that, we'll withdraw the lawsuit. I can't wait to live in my mountain retreat. Julian piled on in an innocent-sounding voice. Don't be ridiculous. I shot back in a trembling voice, but there was no strength behind it. Having been denied even by a judge, a representative of public authority, I felt completely isolated and alone. Let's go, Clara. David took hold of my arm and pulled me away from them. When we stepped outside the courthouse, a cold wind whipped against us. Mr. Chin, am I going to lose? Do I really have to hand over all my savings like the judge says and spend the rest of my life as my brother's slave? Tears spilled out uncontrollably. He said nothing and quietly handed me a handkerchief. Then, with the sharpest look I had ever seen on his face, he turned back toward the courthouse building. No, you won't lose. In fact, the judge's attitude today lit a fire under me. He pulled a notebook from his inner pocket. Clara, could you show me the property materials for that mountain estate one more time? There was something that felt off in the documents the plaintiffs submitted in court. Something off? Yes, for a property priced at $1.2 million, the status of the mortgage liens was unnatural. And Julian's attitude? That wasn't just the face of a spoiled child. I sensed impatience, like he was hiding something. He grinned. Let's dig into this thoroughly. The pitch-black truth hidden behind this thing they call family love. At those words, a tiny flame of hope that had almost gone out deep inside me flickered back to life. That's right. This was no time to cry. If they were going to attack me with morality, then I would fight back with the weapon of facts. From that day on, we began a thorough investigation of their assets. That was how we prepared for our counterattack. And then came the day of the second hearing. My parents were as confident as ever, smirking at me. Julian even had a new designer leather jacket resting on his shoulders as he fiddled with his smartphone. Clara, there's still time. Before the session began, my father called out to me. If you apologize right now and promise to pay, I'll withdraw the lawsuit. Consider it family mercy. Mercy? I smiled back at him coldly. I'll return those words to you exactly as they are, Dad. You'd better run while you still can. What did you say? Just as my father's face turned red, the clerk's voice rang out. Court is now in session. All rise. Judge Morrison entered the courtroom and took his seat with heavy deliberation. The moment he opened his mouth, he shot me an irritated look. Now then, defendant, at the previous session, I believe I strongly recommended a settlement. Have you finished discussing this with your family? No, Your Honor. I answered while staring straight at the judge. There is no room for settlement because it has become clear that there is serious concealment of facts underlying this lawsuit. Concealment, you say? The judge frowned. Beside me, David stood up and raised the thick stack of evidence documents he was holding high in the air. Your Honor, please turn to page 3 of these materials. David's voice carried clearly through the silent courtroom. Judge Morrison adjusted his glasses with a suspicious expression and lowered his gaze to the documents before him. What lay there was the latest certified copy of the property registry for the mountain estate, Whispering Pines, obtained through our exhaustive investigation. This is the crease between the judge's brows deepened. It appears to differ from the materials submitted by the plaintiffs. Yes, what the plaintiffs submitted were documents from immediately after the purchase. However, what my client has submitted is the most recent version, issued just 3 days ago. David continued slowly. In addition to the first priority home mortgage, this property had a second priority mortgage lien placed on it just 2 weeks after the purchase. My father, seated in the plaintiff section, leaned forward. What are you talking about? We borrowed no money other than the home loan. We only have one contract with the bank. Yes, that's what you both believe. This was the first time I opened my mouth, fixing my gaze on my parents and on my brother, who was sitting there pale and trembling. But it seems Julian felt differently. What do you mean by that, Clara? My father shouted, but the judge struck the gavel and silenced him. Order. Counsel for the defense, continue. David nodded and revealed the decisive fact. The creditor for the second mortgage lien is Peak Ridge Finance, a non-bank consumer finance company. And in the debtor field, there is only a single name listed. He paused for a breath and then read the name aloud. Julian Bennett. What? I heard my mother, Eleanor Bennett, gasp. And the maximum amount of that lien is $450,000. A shock rippled through the courtroom. Judge Morrison exclaimed in disbelief. In addition to the home mortgage, another $450,000 was borrowed using this mountain estate as collateral? Impossible, my father shouted. That can't be done. Our consent as co-owners would have been required. Normally, yes. David replied calmly. But what if Julian forged a power of attorney? Or what if he lied and told you these were renovation documents and tricked you into signing them? The color drained rapidly from my parents' faces. The two of them slowly turned to look at Julian sitting beside them. Julian hung his head, clutching his expensive leather jacket, his entire body trembling violently. That sight alone was confession enough. Julian? My mother's voice shook. It can't be true, can it? For $150,000? What did you even use that money for? That's Julian tried to say something in a tiny voice, but I cut him off. This isn't over yet, Your Honor. I stood up and delivered an even more brutal truth. We also traced where that $450,000 actually went. David presented the next piece of evidence, bank transaction statements. These are records from Julian's personal bank account. Over the past several months, thousands of dollars were being transferred almost daily, and on some days, tens of thousands at a time. The destinations are CryptoSpin, Jackpot Kingdom, all of them overseas online crypto casinos. Judge Morrison stood there utterly stunned. That's not all. In an attempt to recover his losses, he piled on even more debt from multiple consumer finance companies and even illegal loan sharks. Based on what we were able to confirm, the total exceeds $250,000. This was the true face of my brother, the so-called musical genius. $700,000? My father collapsed back into his chair. Tell me it's a lie, Julian. Tell me it's a lie. No, Dad. Julian finally lifted his head and screamed through tears. It's an investment. This is an investment. If I hit the right crypto pattern, I can pay it all back tenfold overnight. I'm so close. Just a little more luck and everything will be wiped clean. Those words became the decisive blow that revealed to everyone in the courtroom that he was a severe gambling addict. Silence. The judge's furious voice echoed through the courtroom. So, this is what it comes down to. The plaintiffs either did not know or deliberately concealed the facts of their son's gambling debts and the unauthorized mortgage liens, and then demanded that the defendant, the older sister, take responsibility for the home loan payments. Seizing the moment, I turned the judge's earlier words about moral obligation back on him. Your Honor, at the previous session, you told me that helping one's family is a moral obligation, didn't you? The judge averted his eyes awkwardly. But please look at the reality before us. This mountain estate is already tied to more than $700,000 in hidden debt. If I had done exactly as my parents demanded and signed the mortgage contract as a joint guarantor, what do you think would have happened? I pointed toward the judge and then toward my parents. It is only a matter of time before Julian goes bankrupt. When that happens, the creditors will seize the mountain estate and put it up for auction. The property will pass into someone else's hands, while only the debt remains. And as a joint guarantor, I would be left with the obligation to repay the entire mortgage in a lump sum and potentially even be held responsible for my brother's debts as well. I stepped forward. Your Honor, let me ask you plainly, to destroy my life in order to fill the bottomless pit of debt created by a gambling-addicted brother, is that what the law defines as a family duty? Where exactly is the selfishness in my actions, and where is the filial impiety you accused me of? In response to my words, the courtroom fell completely silent. No one could offer a rebuttal. Judge Morrison's face was flushed deep red. It was not from anger, but from shame. He realized that he had almost been made an accomplice to an outrageous fraud. Counsel for the plaintiffs. The judge's voice was low and terrifying, scraping along the ground. The lawyer hired by my parents stood up, sweating profusely. Yes, Your Honor. Were you aware of these facts? I had no idea. This is the first I've heard of it. If I had known, I would never have accepted a case like this. The lawyer immediately turned on my parents and Julian. I am the one who is deceived, Your Honor. The plaintiffs concealed critical facts. Don't you dare. This time, my father lunged toward the lawyer. You said we would win. You said that if we paid money, we could save our son. Stop it, Dad. Julian screamed in tears. This isn't my fault, it's Clara's fault. If she had just paid the money from the beginning, I could have gambled more on the crypto sites and won everything back. Are you still saying things like that? My mother slapped Julian hard across the face. A sharp, dry sound echoed through the courtroom. Because of you, we're ruined. The courtroom descended into complete chaos. Order, order. When the uproar finally subsided, Judge Morrison let out a deep sigh and turned toward me. There was no longer any hostility in his eyes, only deep remorse. Miss Clara Bennett, the judge spoke quietly. I hereby retract my previous remarks and offer my sincere apology. You were right. This is not family helping one another. It is blatant exploitation and a fraudulent act. The judge turned toward the plaintiff's seats and delivered his ruling in a voice like ice. This lawsuit is hereby dismissed. The plaintiff's claims lack any legal basis and are deemed to constitute an abuse of the judicial system. Furthermore, the plaintiffs are ordered to bear the full amount of the defendant's litigation costs and attorney's fees. Then he added one final statement. Mr. Julian Bennett and his parents, the place you should be facing is not this courtroom, it is bankruptcy court and a place of repentance for your own past actions. Court is adjourned. The sound of the gavel rang out and my complete victory was sealed. The lawsuit was dismissed immediately. The ruling was swift and merciless. The claims brought by my parents and my brother, the plaintiffs, were rejected in their entirety. And instead, they were ordered to bear the full cost of the litigation. And that accursed property, Whispering Pines Estate, was immediately seized by the creditor financial institutions as the $450,000 in hidden debt we uncovered collided with the original home mortgage. But the fallout did not end there. Because of the gambling debts exceeding $250,000 that were exposed in court, my brother Julian, now completely unable to keep his head above water, was forced into personal bankruptcy. My parents, who had acted as joint guarantors, were dragged down with him, losing all of their savings and ultimately being forced to give up the family home they had lived in for decades. Several weeks later, one day, my smartphone was filled with an unbelievable number of missed calls. Dad, Mom, Dad. My voicemail inbox had reached its limit, and when I pressed play, a storm of abuse came pouring out. Clara, what do you think you're doing? Have you forgotten everything we did to raise you? You heartless monster. Money-grubbing witch. Abandoning your family will send you straight to hell. You betrayed your family. Their voices of accusation echoed emptily, but they no longer reached my heart. I blocked every number and cut off all contact. That was my way of drawing a final line, my last reckoning with what they called family. 6 months passed. Now I am standing on the balcony of a newly built penthouse overlooking downtown Seattle. This place is not for anyone else. It is a true castle of my own, purchased entirely with my own savings. Here, there is no exploitation, no unreasonable demands, and no lies. There is only silence and peace. Breaking free from the curse of family required searing pain and immense courage, but beyond that pain awaited a life that no one could ever take away. My own.